employment, education, nutrition, every single outcome you can think of. Housing is essential. Well, wages are then not keeping pace. Good government should be about making sure that everyone has what they need to lead full and vibrant lives. Mandated by law to care for the vulnerable. Punishment is just not very practical, and it's not economically viable.
Today's podcast is a little different. While we were in Hennepin County recording our documentary on how they're reducing homelessness, go to our YouTube channel. You can watch the whole documentary right now. We interviewed County Commissioner Irene Fernando. It was probably the best conversation I have had with an elected politician. So we decided to take the whole interview and turn it into a podcast.
So first, nice to meet you. I'm Commissioner Irene Fernando, but you can call me Commish. I use she, her pronouns, and am really honored to be the youngest woman to ever serve on the Hennepin County Board, the first Filipino American elected in the state of Minnesota, and the first board chair of color since Hennepin's founding in 1852. Hennepin County is an essential place in the state of Minnesota. We are the most populous. We have the most people of all 87 counties. Minneapolis and 44 cities are what is within here. My district stretches suburban communities and the city of Minneapolis. And I think it's really important because really strong policy making that reaches all residents and their households and their needs has to have a broad scope and really needs to localize from the viewpoint of who is being served. We have to listen as deeply as possible to those who are experiencing our decisions and those who are implementing our decisions. And that really is at the center of the ways in which Hennepin's broader housing and shelter policies have strengthened and evolved over a couple decades. And more prominently in these last 5 years, that is at the absolute center of every single funding cycle, every single budget presentation, every time we add staff or expand partners or shift a little bit of how we are discussing the model that we are engaged in. At the center of that is, are we listening as deeply and as authentically as possible to those who are experiencing our decisions? And are we listening as deeply and as authentically as possible to the staff, partners, advocates who are implementing those decisions?
We've traveled around all week, and it's really evident that it's not just housing, shelter, eviction prevention, affordable housing. It's a community-wide system.
That's right.
Can you talk about that, but from the lens of somebody who, you know, as a politician that has to get everybody to agree on that? Because in many communities, they are struggling to get that coordination.
I think instead of seeing it as political agreement, I would focus on who is being served, what outcomes are needed, who is benefited when those outcomes are achieved. So it's for us, it's less about everyone agreeing, and it's more about, again, laser focus on, is it meeting outcomes? Are there fewer people today than 10 years ago who are unsheltered? Are there more resources present today than 10 years ago that meets the specific needs that we know our residents are facing, particularly our unhoused residents? From a governance perspective, Hennepin County and Minnesota is exceptioned a little bit. There are only 10 states in the country that are considered county administered. So that means, you know, we have, of course, state government and city government, where you have to pass either through a council or through chambers, and then it's signed into law by the governor or signed into a policy by the mayor. That means there's an assembly and an executive. In Minnesota and here at Hennepin County, we get to appoint our executive. So the 7 county commissioners are a self-ratifying legislative body, and we appoint the administrator, kind of like a countywide CEO, who then gets to implement and complete what we have agreed upon as a county, just the 7 of us. So what does that create here? There isn't a combative tension between administration and the commissioners in ways that there might be at other jurisdictions. So that is very, very positive. The second thing from a governance perspective that assists is counties are the main level of government mandated by law to care for the vulnerable. Now, how might we care for the vulnerable in today's world? Well, it has to be with immense compassion for the types of contexts and the present conditions. It has to be with a clear sense of outcomes and who benefits and why it's meaningful to us. And last but certainly not least, in an ongoing, accurate set of data. The quality of our interventions and programs is based off of the quality of our data, based off of the quality of the questions, and the quality of relationships we have to the people who are answering those questions. Maybe it was so that unhoused residents weren't as comfortable at a different time, sharing the true reality of what it takes to survive each day, or at times what they'll say each hour, each minute. And so through a compassionate, person-centered approach, a very clear set of outcomes and a dynamic relationship to who benefits when we succeed and when we fail in achieving those outcomes, and the ongoing set of questions, data, and relationships that needs to inform that, because this is a minute-by-minute, everyday type of commitment. Good government should be about making sure that everyone has what they need to lead full and vibrant lives, authentic in their personhood and genuine in their sense of belonging. And that is what we believe every single individual who comes in our care should be able to access. Now, I believe housing is a human right, and I look forward to a time where our policies and funding match that value. Hennepin is not all the way there yet, but I'm very, very proud of our progress, and I am eager to ensure that we are supporting and bringing other jurisdictions with us locally and across the country in partnership and really centering on those who benefit.
That's what we're trying to do, is take what you guys are doing here so other communities will say, wow, they're doing it, we can do it, right? And speaking of other communities, in many communities across the country, and I believe it's short-term thinking by politicians, and they're pushing for criminalization. Grants Pass has gone to the Supreme Court. We just did a documentary, Grants Pass. What would you say to politicians that are pushing for a punitive response, which is short-term, instead of investing in long-term investments like housing and eviction prevention?
In total upfrontness, I don't spend a lot of time trying to convince people to not be punitive to our fellow human neighbor. It's not that I'm against it, but I have found it to be far more energizing and impactful to spend time with those who are in need of care and hearing from their perspective, those who are seeking to advocate for that care to be different, and of course those implementing it. But on the merits, I have a few responses to this. Punishment is just not very practical, and it's not economically viable.
Full stop.
It's just, it doesn't achieve the outcome. It is not less expensive. I kind of struggle with generating logic that would support that position. People don't usually receive well that is my answer, so I found other ways to focus, but just to be very plain about it, criminalizing humans that have nowhere to lay their head at night is not compassionate to me. It is not logical to me. It also does not happen to make economic sense, and it also does not allow us to achieve what in many instances we are expected to offer by way of law and policy.
In the long run, it's going to make homelessness worse. It makes it harder for case managers to keep in contact with people. If somebody goes into the criminal justice system, now they get a record, it's going to be harder for them to get a job, but I'm sure you have constituents that just want homeless people gone. They just don't want to see the encampments. And you're investing, you're somehow, miracle, I've seen so many unicorns here, right? That you're able to say, oh, I hear you, but here's a better solution. It might take a little while longer, but let's permanently help these people.
When I entered the county, we had instances where people are working 2 or 3 full-time jobs and staying in our shelter system. People can connect with the idea that a household is literally working 1 or more full-time jobs and is still unable to have a safe place for them and their kids to lay their heads at night. And really reminding individuals and communities of the shared humanity that I believe is still within each of us, has been both honest from my part and has been effective. And the data bears out in shelters all across this country. If your community is lucky to have a shelter, there are individuals who are working full-time jobs. So what are the other aspects that we can lift up? Well, wages are then not keeping pace. Okay. In school districts across the country, they measure which kids are not having consistent places to lay their heads before school. Surely we can invest in the 7-year-old to have a safe place to lay their head, right? And so that's how we have, that we've been very focused on centering the shared humanity, and that's reflected in our programmatic style. We gotta know your name. I don't need to know your name. That might not quite be appropriate. I feel a bit of concern at times with some of the political tourism that can occur for those who are in their worst, they're in their worst position. And then there's some political tourism. I'm sensitive to that. But a Hennepin outreach worker should know their name. And when we bring government, so I'm going to be distinct here again, what government can and should be about. And for those of us who happen to also be politicians, willing to draw some line around what government should complete for its residents versus what politics or outside forces are trying to speak about on behalf of these residents. That gap is where I hope we can create a stronger path for those who, at the end of the day, really just want to make a difference. And I would recruit them to consider running for county. It's a really good place to make a difference. Running for office is kind of not my personal selection for how I would attain a job. But as far as jobs go and community impact, in my just handful of years here at the county, we have created a housing continuum from temporary shelter to single room occupancy to deeply affordable to market rate. We've literally created a housing continuum. We were the first jurisdiction to invest in deeply affordable, so that's 30% AMI, area median income and below, pairing it with supportive services, ensuring that there's opportunities for what people might also term as transitional housing. And we are doing so in these years, from 2019 to present. These are heavy years to be advancing, because that is how essential housing is to every single outcome. Yeah. Employment, education, nutrition, every single outcome you can think of, housing is essential. Housing is a human right, and I absolutely am eager to live in a world where our policies and funding match that value, match that inherent sense of humanity, that we need to have a safe place to lay our heads, to rest, and to be with our family, chosen or otherwise.